Hi, I'm Lace Watkins, Executive Director, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer, and Head Chef of the Lace on Race Cafe. Coming at you today from beautiful, sunny, and incredibly hot Southern California. I have my fan on, but it's at more of a distance than it was yesterday, so what I'm hoping is that it will be less intrusive. My apologies to those of you who said that the fan was a distraction yesterday. I absolutely agree. One of the things that this incredibly bad cult leader has to contend with is that the Lace on Race Center is housed in another building, a larger building, and this space does not have windows, which means it doesn't have air circulation, which means I always need to have a fan on, especially on days that are this hot. So my apologies in advance. For those of you who are new to this channel, both on Facebook and on YouTube, welcome. To those of you who are returning, howdy! Good to see you again. Today we are going to be talking about the second part of what we talked about yesterday in terms of the tyranny of FICO. We're going to expand it out, pan out, if you'll allow me, to talk about the greater issues that go beyond just what happened to me yesterday and goes beyond even the extrapolations that I made yesterday. As always, you know me, I'm going to start with a story. Before I do, though, I just want to let you know, if you like what you have been seeing and you want to see more of it, I invite you to engage with us. Comment, like, react, absolutely share, and also consider becoming a financial partner and a financial engager of the Lace on Race Center for Racial Equity. It absolutely pays my salary, but it also allows us to do a lot of cool things. If you have any questions, shoot me a message. If you would like to be part of something that hopefully will have sustainability throughout the years, that asks questions no one else asks, I invite you to partner with me, to partner with us, to make sure that this keeps going. Let's talk about yesterday. I'm going to give you a brief refresher. We were talking about FICO scores and how they can really ruin lives. I had a very disturbing, well, at least initially, disturbing incident that happened yesterday, and it took me down the rabbit hole of FICO scores, credit institutions, and how they deal with and how they affect marginalized people, particularly people of color, most particularly Black people. Well, you know, after I turned the video off yesterday, after the live was finished and I was doing other things, of course my wheels kept turning, and I started thinking about it. And just maybe 15 minutes ago, one of my staff members, Vicky, who read my script from yesterday, said to me, you know, we need to talk about the morality and the ethics of needing a credit score at all. Why can't you have a credit score of 0? And she's absolutely right. In order to talk about this well, though, I want to pivot just a little bit and talk about what's considered front of house and back of house for our purposes. Here's my story. Before I started working for the county, and even before then, before I started working in social services, and sometimes even when I was working in social services, because as those of you know, front-facing social services people don't make a whole lot of money, I worked in both retail and in the food industry. Most often front of house, a few times back of house, but for the most part, I was the person you saw. I was the hostess, I was the manager, sometimes I was the cocktail waitress. That was a fun gig. It's the same thing in retail. Sometimes I was the shop girl, sometimes I was the supervisor, but in any case, when you were looking at what was going on, whatever happened, good or bad, it was because of my mug, or that's the perception. If I did not treat you well, you didn't think about the institution you thought about me. If there was a policy that I had to enforce, like liquor laws, like cutting someone off, for example, like the hotels or the restaurants policy of if there's 8 of you, I can't seat you until there's 8, 6 isn't enough, I can get fired. That's who they saw. So they might leave not angry at Harbor House, but angry at the woman who insisted upon the policy. There's a lot going on here. There's 2 things, actually. One, about good people sometimes enforcing ambiguous or ambivalent or capricious and sometimes just downright bad policy and law. And then there is the difference in the experience that people see. Very few people go behind the front of the house. Very few people enter the kitchen in a restaurant. Very few people enter the stockroom in retail. Even very few people looked at the back of the house, used metaphorically, when it came to social service work. Now, I loved front-facing work. In fact, I resisted for a long time becoming a supervisor because, as anyone in social services or social work knows, the higher up you go, the lower your amount of client contact. Well, I got into the field because I wanted client contact. It meant that I didn't buy a new pair of pants for, almost 8 years, came to love the thrift stores in Hillcrest, y'all. But that also meant that I could not affect policy. Yesterday, when I was talking about my 65-point FICO drop, and if you're interested in that, look at yesterday's video. But when I was talking about that, I was very careful and very intentional about making sure that you knew that the people that I interfaced with at Calvet were wonderful. That's a big deal. What I loved most about the experience, though, is that the 3 people that I wound up interacting with all readily agreed with me about the fact that some of their policies were funky. I have 2 comments that I'm going to put in yesterday's video. One that talked about something that one of them said kind of inadvertently and that I want to talk about because it has to do with my experience 20 years ago. And also a question that they couldn't answer, but that I would love to do a deeper dive in, which is, all things considered, I would love to see over, say, 20 to 30 years, over the life of a given loan, when people fall into hard times or if something goes sideways, who is Calvet most willing to help? And I have a sneaking suspicion I would not like the answers I got. I don't even know if they keep those kinds of records, but it would be interesting, even if I couldn't differentiate by race, I could make some extrapolations based upon zip code. And Calvet's a home loan entity, and they could tell me about the zip codes. So, but the bigger part is that there are a lot of times when good people have to both enforce and explain funky policy. And I have to think about that a lot. I know that in my, good Lord, 45-year working history, I know that as a retail person and as a front of the house person, a server or a hostess, I had to explain policies that I didn't agree with. What is the big deal? If there's a party of 8 and I can sit the 6 of you, I can give you water, I can give you drinks, I can let you look at the menu. If it turns out that there's only 6 of you, or if one other person shows up, it's no skin off of anybody's neck, really. It's not that much harder to do a 6 top than it is an 8 top. But the policy was clear and the policy was rigid. Same thing in retail. When someone brings in a pair of pants after 32 days and the return policy is 30. What do you do? This is where grace and mercy can come in when allowed. And this is also the problem that we were talking about as well, both in the comments section, if you'll go and look at that video, and also with the delinquents and leadership team. We were talking about the fact that even when there was room for grace, room for mercy, how did that play out? And also, when did people feel empowered to be able to push back and sometimes get relief or mitigation? That's another big deal. Now, 20 years ago, I didn't. When Bob was super sick, I took what they gave me, and that was to my detriment. And fast forward 22 years later, I'm less likely to do this. I've got enough confidence under my belt and enough personal agency and enough success in making my cases to be able to, if I have to, go in guns a-blazing. That's not always true, though. I want to talk a little bit about the racism inherent. Now, a lot of this is class melded with race. But I think it's worth talking about before we go to the back of the house. Front of the house people have a lot of responsibility. What they don't have is a lot of authority. People talk a lot about empowering workers, but only up to a certain point. I do remember when I worked at what is now Macy's, but used to be called May Company here. Macy's swallowed up a lot of department stores. But at May Company, I did have discretion. I was able to say, oh yeah, your receipt says it's 32 days past, but you know what? Go for it. If the size 14 doesn't fit you, the size 14 doesn't fit you. I was able to make not quite equal exchanges. I was able to make price adjustments. I was able to do quite a few things. And then they tightened it up. They didn't really give good reasons for tightening it up, but they did. They tightened it. But the people who made that policy were not the ones that had to stand in front of an irate lady from North Park who really just wants the khaki. I didn't like the brown, I want the khaki. And here I am saying, no, that's a $2 difference, man, and I can't. Yes, I know exactly. They were this price a week ago, but here you go. I could not make that discretion. In social services, or in social psychology rather, there is a special kind of stress that is very akin, by the way, to racialized stress, where a person has a high accountability, a high responsibility, but very little agency and very little autonomy. Most front-facing, or a lot of front-facing jobs are exactly that. And it's a very, very short hop to race, where we have responsibility and accountability, outsized accountability and responsibility, but often society does its damnedest to make sure that we do not have autonomy and agency. This is a really big deal, because oftentimes when we are looking at front-facing people and the people that they are interacting with, oftentimes it's a marginalized person dealing with another marginalized person, having to explain a policy that they don't agree with and sometimes don't even fully comprehend, because back of the house isn't forthcoming, is opaque, and they know that they don't have to explain it to the customer, and they'll never have to see the customer. When May Company was just May Company and it was based in St. Louis, Missouri, oh my goodness, it was a time. We were unionized. By the time I left, the union was falling out of favor, and I think it was less than 2 years later when it merged with another department store and took on their policies, that the union was gone. And then that lack of autonomy and that lack of agency came into full force. I know a lot of people left during that time, but a lot of people couldn't. There is a lot of stress that's involved in not being able to give people what they want, particularly when it's a relatively easy fix. When it's a relatively easy way to have the customer, or in this case, the person in front of you, feeling good about the interaction and about you. No, I'm sorry, I can't do the brown sauce on the mashed potatoes. It only comes with the cream sauce, and I can't make any substitutions. It says so right on the menu. And I'm sitting here going, oh my goodness, why can't I just give her the brown sauce? This brings us to the back of the house, where the decisions are made, where long and short-term plans are devised, where agendas are formulated, most of the time covertly. When we talk about credit scores like we did yesterday, there is no one other than the people at Fair Isaacs and Company and the other credit reporting, because FICO is a Fair Isaacs score for the most part, that truly know what goes into the mix. A lot of these algorithms are proprietary. That's why you get 3 different credit scores from Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian, and also FICO or the business one. But they're pretty much similar. If you have a 750 credit score with Experian, it would be a very weird thing to have a 500 credit score with TransUnion. But nobody talks about what you need to do. There are people who can kind of tell you how to do better, some more ethical than others. But wouldn't it be nice if there was a transparent process? These are the decisions that we make. This is how we arrive at these decisions. These really are the factors that govern this, and here's the ratio. Now, you can do that in kind of a dirty way. If I pull my Experian credit report, it tells me what a pie of 100%, 35% is pay on time average, the rest is debt to income ratio, how much I've opened recently, how many hard inquiries I've had. But there's more to that. That pie chart that shows a perfect 100% with the 5 factors that they're willing to disclose is a lie. And that's the same thing in a lot of ways with race. Much of what we talk about in terms of, well, of course, because nowadays in 2022, it's softer, and there are concessions that really aren't concessions. People are willing to talk about race and white supremacy and racism in the abstract, in the hypothetical. But when you want to get granular, when you want to boil it down to its essence, that's when you get a lot of pushback. It's the same thing when we're looking at how corporations and governments and academia and nonprofits even deal with race. If the process by which decisions are made are less than transparent, if the people who make those decisions can hide behind a closed door, if the people who have to enforce and explain these positions are forced to, in one way or another, make soul-killing, death by 1,000 cuts decisions, I know that there are times that I would be mouthing a decision, but would, in my eyes, please let them see how I feel about what I'm mouthing. I've seen it with people since I've been out of retail and hospitality as well. And also the Faustian bargains that people make. You should not have to necessarily feel like you need an acid bath after a day of work. But a lot of frontline employees do. The back of the house is where the action is. It's where the tone is set. It's where the unspoken mores and gestalt and vibe of a given environment, both forward facing that serves the public and also in the back of the house itself, that makes a huge difference on how things are explained and enforced. It is the big difference between whether or not there are exceptions to be made and to whom. Yesterday we talked about two people with identical credit scores who had let's just say, that 1 month, 30-day delinquency. How would someone in Poway, a fairly high income, mostly white area, fare with a given front-facing employee? Would they get creative? Okay. How much are they willing to work with this person as opposed to someone who lives in Barrio Logan? Same credit score. How fast are they willing to escalate? How fast are they willing to take the keys to a house or to a car? Let's pivot back to race for a minute. We can talk a lot about the front of the house things when it comes to race, the obvious things. Let's take employment for a moment. Most of the time when we think about employment, we are thinking about the stuff that's obvious, and usually we look at hiring ratios. We look at hiring issues, HR. Who's hired in what position? What's the retention rate? Does it get whiter as you go up the pyramid? Almost always, yes. But we don't look at the rest of it. We don't look at the code words such as corporate fit, company culture. We don't look at the idea that if someone says, you know, she really intimidates me, I'm afraid of her, as someone did to me 2 weeks ago. What then? Who was believed first? Who was believed most? Whose character is assumed to be more credulous? All of these things are big factors. Now let's move away from HR. Let's move away from HR. And let's talk about manufacturing. There is one of 300 tabs on this Lenovo computer that hates my guts because I don't think it ever wanted to have 300 tabs open. I don't think it thought that it was possible. It's possible. But one of those tabs talks about the Tesla factory in Northern California and how black and brown employees are treated there. Mostly black employees are treated there, and the short answer is horribly. It is a big question as to chicken and the egg when it comes to back of the house company culture, company ethos. Does one beget the other? Which came first? There are a lot of things that are supposed to be extant when it comes to employee relations, and also when it comes to who gets the most dangerous job, who is expected to work the worst shifts, who gets hired first, who gets fired first. Now this is all front of the house stuff, but it's the back of the house stuff. Where does Tesla dump its toxic waste? No one asks that question. What about, because Tesla manufactures very few of its parts, it contracts out. So we can't just only talk about Tesla. We've got to talk about the entities that Tesla touches. What about them? We have to talk about whether or not Tesla will ever become unionized, because Tesla is every bit as anti-union as Walmart or Starbucks or the rest. We have to talk about front-facing image that people with high responsibility and high accountability but low authority have to try to uphold. And there is a very, do you remember that movie Get Out? There is a very Get Out kind of vibe when you have someone saying one thing and looking the exact opposite. Yeah, that's our policy. And you can feel it. You can feel it. So when we're talking about a holistic racial justice praxis, it can't just be the front of the house stuff, the stuff that you see, the stuff that the media decides you should know. It needs to be back of the house stuff too. Here's another example before I let you go, because we're going to talk about this more, and I think it's really important that we talk about this more. The door that everybody sees, everybody wants to know what's behind it. What's behind the door? Well, actually, it is a storage stuff, because I think we keep seasonal stuff in there. In fact, I know we do. But it's also, most of it though, outside of the few shelves, most of it is the guts of this building. It's our solar system. It is our HVAC. It is our gas and lights. Everything is housed back there. And I want you to think about that when you think about front of the house. There's only so much that we can do front of house versus back of house. If someone comes in here and they are hot, I can point a fan on them, but that's really all I can do. Technically, I can move the thermostat, but I can't justify moving a thermostat so that this one room can be cooler or hotter. But it's basically, that thermostat controls about 5,000 square feet. I can't justify that. That's too much. But what I'm saying, though, is that I have limited authority and limited ability to be able to, in this case, live out my values of not having someone die of heat stroke in my office. It's back there where the action is. And we can talk about it all the time. We can talk about who we are in terms of front-facing all the time. But we need to be able to have the courage to pull back the curtain and not just look at the sexy stuff. Not just look at petitions, not just look at Facebook warriors and likes and hearts and even sending very strongly worded emails because we see something that's front-facing. We're going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about conscious consumerism. Spoiler alert, there's no such thing, not really. But it's worth it to think about all of these things. When we are looking at front of the house white supremacy, when we are looking at hoods, when we are looking at N-words, when we are looking at obvious slights and obvious faux pas for which someone makes an apology tour, that's important. That's absolutely important. But it's even more important to look at what's going on behind the door. We'll talk about this more later. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, if you have any questions, put them in the comments. Comment, react, like and heart, but also react. Share. If you like what you're seeing and you want this to continue, please consider financial engagement with the Lace on Race Center for Racial Equity. Again, it does pay my salary, but it also pays for a lot of other things. And I would love to be able to partner with you in greater ways. People have also been asking about whether or not one-on-one and small groups are still available. Yes, I love doing one-on-one abiding, and I love small groups. So I know that Vicki is going to clutch her pearls when I say this, but I will always make room for abiding time in small groups. If you're interested in that, shoot us a message and we'll get to you, and I will calm Vicki down as she rearranges my calendar for you. I love you so much. There's more to come, and you're going to see me in this dress for the rest of the day. Hesed heart, y'all. Hesed heart.